The dying alien ship tumbled through space like a broken bird. Its silver hull was torn open in 3 places, and strange blue fluid leaked from the wounds into the cold darkness. Emergency signals screamed from every communication device on board. As the vessel limped toward the edge of human space, Commander Talia Reeves stood on the bridge of the Earth defense cruiser Defiance and watched the alien craft approach. Her weathered face showed no emotion, but her gray eyes tracked every detail. 20 years of fighting pirates and hostile aliens had taught her to be careful. Trust could get you killed out here in the black. "Ma'am, the alien ship is requesting emergency docking," said Lieutenant Hayes from his position at the communications console. His young face was pale with excitement. First contact situations were rare and dangerous. "Any weapons signatures?" Reeves asked without taking her eyes off the main screen. "Negative, Commander. Their power systems are failing fast." "Whatever hit them hard," Reeves nodded slowly. The ship looked harmless enough, but appearances meant nothing in space. She had seen cargo haulers that could crack a moon and warships, disguised as medical transports. Still, something about the vessel's desperate flight pattern suggested genuine fear rather than deception. "Bring them aboard," she ordered. "But keep the Marines ready. If this goes bad, I want options." The alien ship barely made it to the docking bay before its engines died completely. Through the observation windows, Reeves watched as the strange craft settled onto the deck with a grinding crash that sent sparks flying. Emergency crews rushed forward with fire suppressors and cutting tools, while armed Marines took positions behind cover. The airlock opened with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. What emerged made even the hardened Marines step back in surprise. The alien was tall and thin, with skin like colored glass. 4 delicate arms moved in graceful patterns, while large dark eyes searched the faces around it. Blood the color of starlight dripped from wounds on its chest and legs. "Please," the alien said in broken English through a small device attached to its throat. "My people dying, need help. You are humans, yes." The Deathworld warriors, Dr. Enzo Blackwood, pushed through the Marine cordon and knelt beside the injured alien. As the ship's xenobiologist, he was the closest thing they had to a first contact specialist. His gentle hands began examining the creature's wounds while his mind raced to process what he was seeing. "I am Ambassador Lyra of the Villani people," the alien continued. Her voice was like music, but filled with pain and exhaustion. "Our worlds burn. The Harvest Collective takes everything. We heard stories of humans, stories of warriors from a death world who do not surrender." Reeves moved closer, but kept her hand near her sidearm. The alien's desperate tone seemed genuine, but she had learned not to trust emotions in first contact situations. Too many species were good at manipulation. "What exactly do you want from us?" she asked in a firm voice. Lyra reached into a pouch on her belt with trembling fingers. She pulled out a small crystal device that immediately projected a 3-dimensional map above her palm. Dozens of star systems appeared in soft blue light, with many marked by angry red symbols. 27 worlds, Lyra whispered. "All gone. In the last year. The collective comes from deep space with ships like nothing we have seen. They take our people for slaves and strip our planets bare. The other species in our sector refuse to help. They say the collective is too strong." Dr. Blackwood looked up from his medical scanner with a grim expression. "Commander," she's telling, "the truth about the injuries. These are energy weapon burns, and they're infected with some kind of synthetic virus. Whatever attacked her people has weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering." The holographic map zoomed in on one system after another. Each showed the same pattern. Villani colonies reduced to dead rocks, while massive alien ships hung in orbit like metal vultures. The few surviving population centers were surrounded by strange mechanical structures that pulsed with dark energy. "Why come to us?" Reeves asked. "Human space is far from your territory. There are closer species with larger fleets." Lyra's large eyes focused on the commander with desperate intensity. "Because you survived? Your Earth is a death world that would kill most species in days. The stories say humans learn to fight by fighting their own planet every day. That you do not know how to surrender, because surrender Means death on your world. The stories also say we're violent and unpredictable, Reeves replied. Most species avoid us. Yes, Lyra said with something that might have been a smile. The is why we came? The collective has never faced true Deathworlders. They take worlds by making the defenders give up hope. But humans do not give up hope, do they? Before Reeves could answer, the ship's alarm system began screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the docking bay as Lieutenant Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom. Commander, we have multiple massive energy signatures dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Unknown configuration, but they're huge. At least 30 contacts and more appearing every second. Reeves felt ice form in her stomach. She had been in space long enough to know what this meant. The aliens had been followed. Whatever had destroyed 27 Villani worlds was now on humanity's doorstep. Ambassador, she said urgently, is this them? Is this the Harvest Collective? Lyra's glass-like skin seemed to dim with terror. Her forearms wrapped around her injured body as she stared at the tactical display Hayes had activated. Dozens of red dots were moving toward the inner system in a perfect formation that spoke of unified purpose and terrible efficiency. Yes, she whispered. They followed my ship. I have doomed you all. The collective does not allow anyone to escape their harvest zones. They will take this system and add your people to their slave armies. The docking bay fell silent except for the steady pulse of the alarm. Every human present understood what they were facing. An unknown enemy with superior numbers and weapons was approaching Earth's outer colonies. The normal response would be to evacuate and call for reinforcements from the inner systems, but Reeves found herself thinking about the burned Villani worlds and the enslaved populations. She thought about the desperate journey this injured alien had made to find help. Most of all, she thought about what Dr. Blackwood had said about weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. Hayes, she called out, signal the fleet command. Tell them we have first contact with a hostile force and request immediate backup. Aye, Commander. What about the alien? Reeves looked down at Ambassador Lyra, who was still staring at the approaching enemy fleet with haunted eyes. The Villani had traveled across the galaxy looking for warriors crazy enough to fight the impossible. They had come to the right place. Dr. Blackwood, get her to medical and treat those wounds. I want her alive and talking, Reeves ordered. Ambassador, your people came looking for Deathworld warriors. You found them. Now let's see what these Harvest Collective bastards do when they run into humans who have nothing left to lose. The red dots on the tactical display continued their steady approach toward the heart of human space. In 6 hours they would reach the outer colonies. In 12 hours they would be in position to attack Earth itself. But for the first time since her world began burning, Ambassador Lyra felt something other than despair. She felt hope. The emergency meeting room, deep inside Earth Defense Command, buzzed with tension. Admiral Marcus Stone sat at the head of the long metal table and studied the faces of his senior officers. These were men and women who had fought pirates in the Outer Rim and hostile aliens in the border sectors. They had seen combat that would break lesser species. But the data streaming in from long-range sensors was unlike anything they had faced before. Captain Rosa Martinez leaned forward in her chair and pointed at the main display. Her scarred hands moved with practiced efficiency as she manipulated the tactical readout. The approaching enemy fleet had grown to over 50 ships, and more were arriving every hour. So the enemy formation is perfect, she said in her gravelly voice. No gaps, no weak points, and they're maintaining formation even while more ships join them. That level of coordination suggests either an artificial intelligence or some kind of hive mind control. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was the youngest officer in the room, but his tactical analysis had impressed everyone who worked with him. He stood and activated his personal data pad, which connected to the main display. Detailed schematics of the alien ships appeared in rotating three-dimensional models. The vessel designs don't match any known species in our database, he reported. But look at this. Each ship incorporates technology from multiple sources. The hulls show resilient energy shield patterns. The weapons are similar to Centauri plasma. Cannons and the engines use principles we've seen in 3 different alien technologies. Dr. Blackwood entered the room still wearing his medical coat stained with alien blood. He had spent the last 4 hours treating Ambassador Lyra and learning everything he could about the Villani and their enemy. His normally calm face was pale with exhaustion and something darker. "Gentlemen, the situation is worse than we thought," he announced as he took his seat. "The ambassador has provided detailed intelligence on Harvest Collective tactics. They don't just conquer species, they absorb them. Every ship in that fleet is crewed by enslaved minds from the races they've defeated. They take the best technology from each conquest and add it to their own forces." Admiral Stone felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. In 30 years of military service, he had learned to recognize the signs of an impossible fight. Superior technology and an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. Most commanders would already be planning evacuation procedures. "How many species have they absorbed?" he asked. 17 confirmed, Dr. Blackwood replied. "The Villani were number 18, but some escaped to warn us. Each conquest has made the collective more dangerous. They now have access to the combined military knowledge of every species they've enslaved." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just facing one alien species, they were facing the combined might of 18 different civilizations, all controlled by a single, hostile intelligence. Captain Martinez broke the silence with a short, bitter laugh. "Well, sir, it sounds like we're fucked." Standard procedure would be to evacuate the outer colonies and fall back to the inner defense perimeter. "Standard procedure assumes we're facing a normal enemy," Admiral Stone replied. "This collective doesn't seem interested in negotiation or limited conquest. They want everything and everyone." Lieutenant Morrison cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, I've been analyzing their previous battles based on the data Ambassador Lyra provided. Every species they fought tried the same approach. They attempted to match collective technology with their own advanced weapons and defensive systems. They all failed because the enemy could adapt faster than they could innovate." "So what do you suggest, Lieutenant?" Stone asked. Morrison activated another display showing human military equipment. Kinetic rifles, plasma cannons, nuclear warheads, and chemical explosives filled the screen. Compared to the elegant energy weapons and exotic shields used by other species, human technology looked crude and primitive. "Sir, what if we don't try to match their technology? What if we use weapons they've never seen before because no advanced species would ever build them?" Dr. Blackwood looked puzzled. "I don't understand. Our weapons are less advanced than most galactic civilizations. We still use gunpowder and nuclear fission, while other species have energy weapons and antimatter." "Exactly," Morrison said with growing excitement. "The collective has absorbed 17 species worth of advanced military knowledge. They know how to counter energy shields, quantum torpedoes, and gravitational weapons. But when was the last time anyone in this galaxy used a simple kinetic projectile fired by chemical propulsion?" Admiral Stone leaned back in his chair as he considered the implications. Human military doctrine had always been considered primitive by galactic standards. While other species developed elegant solutions to warfare, humans built weapons that were redundant, brutal, and designed to keep working even when everything went wrong. "Earth defense doctrine," he said slowly. "Overwhelming firepower, multiple redundant systems, and the willingness to take casualties that would break other species. The Deathworld approach," Captain Martinez added with a grim smile. "We learned to fight by fighting a planet that tried to kill us every day. Every human weapon system is designed around the assumption that everything will go wrong and you'll need to keep fighting. Anyway," Morrison nodded enthusiastically, "a collective ship designed to absorb energy weapon impacts might not even have armor thick enough to stop a depleted uranium penetrator. Their adaptive shields might not recognize a chemical warhead as a threat until it's too late." Dr. Blackwood looked thoughtful. "Ambassador Lyra mentioned that human reputation in this part of the galaxy is mostly based on rumors and fear. Other species avoid us because they consider us unpredictably violent. The collective might not have accurate intelligence on our actual capabilities. Admiral Stone stood and walked to the main display. The enemy fleet was now less than 4 hours from the outer colonies. Soon they would have to make a decision that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but potentially every free species in the galaxy. Captain Martinez, your ship, the Indomitable, is equipped with the new experimental weapon systems. How quickly can you get her ready for combat? Martinez checked her chronometer. 2 hours, sir. My crew knows their business, and we've been running combat drills for months. Lieutenant Morrison, I want you to prepare a full tactical analysis based on your theory. Assume we're fighting with deliberately primitive weapons against an enemy that expects advanced technology. What advantages does that give us? Already working on it, sir. Morrison replied as his fingers flew over his datapad. Stone turned to Dr. Blackwood. Doctor, I need you to stay with Ambassador Lyra. Get everything she knows about collective ship design weaknesses and tactical patterns. If we're going to fight this battle, we need every advantage we can get. The Admiral looked around the room at the faces of his officers. They were scared but determined. The same expression he had seen on human faces throughout history when they were faced with impossible odds and chose to fight anyway. Gentlemen, we have a choice. We can evacuate and hope the collective is satisfied with the outer colonies. Or we can show these bastards what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species. Captain Martinez stood and saluted. Sir, the Indomitable and her crew volunteer for the first wave. If we're going to hell, we might as well lead the way. One by one, the other officers stood and voiced their agreement. Admiral Stone felt a familiar mixture of pride and sadness. He was about to send good people to die in a battle they might not win. But someone had to stand between the darkness and the light. Signal all available ships to rendezvous at Titan Station, he ordered. We're going to war. The Proxima Refuge orbital habitat hung in space like a wounded giant. The massive station had once housed 3 million Villani civilians, but now its outer sections were dark and twisted metal. Harvest collective ships moved around it like sharks, feeding on a dying whale, while smaller craft shuttled between the alien vessels and the station's remaining populated areas. Captain Elena Cross watched the scene from the bridge of her scout ship Razor's Edge. Her small vessel was hidden in the shadow of an asteroid field at the edge of the system while she studied the enemy through passive sensors. What she saw made her stomach turn with anger. How many collective ships? She asked her tactical officer. 15 confirmed, Captain. Various sizes from small scouts to what looks like a heavy cruiser. They've got the station completely surrounded, and they're taking their time, Cross nodded grimly. The enemy wasn't in any hurry because they didn't expect resistance. According to the intelligence from Ambassador Lyra, the collective had never faced a species that fought back effectively. They were used to their victims surrendering once they realized the hopelessness of their situation. Any sign of Villani Defense Forces? Negative, Captain. Looks like they either evacuated or were destroyed in the initial attack. Sergeant Ben Cooper moved up from the cargo hold where he had been checking his Marine Squad's equipment. The big man's scarred face was set in the expression he wore before combat. 20 years of boarding actions and close-quarters fighting had taught him to read tactical situations quickly. Captain, we've got 6 Marines and enough firepower too. Take maybe one of those smaller ships, he said quietly. But if we're going in, we need to do it soon. Long-range sensors show the main collective fleet is only 2 hours behind us. Cross checked her chronometer. The human battle fleet was still 6 hours away, which meant her small scout ship was the only hope for the civilians trapped on that station. Standard military doctrine said she should observe and report back. But standard doctrine hadn't counted on facing an enemy that enslaved entire populations. Tech Specialist Park, what can you tell me about their ship designs? She called out. Amy. Park looked up from her electronics console where streams of data flowed across multiple screens. Her young face was intense with concentration as she analyzed the energy signatures and communication patterns of the enemy vessels. Captain, their hulls appeared to be partially organic. I'm reading biological components integrated with mechanical systems. The ships are also communicating through some kind of quantum entanglement network which explains their perfect coordination. Any weaknesses? Park highlighted several sections of the enemy ships on her display. The organic components seemed to be concentrated around their shield generators and weapon systems. If we could disrupt the biological functions, it might cascade through their entire network. Cooper grinned with predatory satisfaction. Sounds like they need to breathe, Captain. Marines know how to deal with things that need to breathe. Cross made her decision. 3 million Villani civilians were going to die if someone didn't act, and her crew had volunteered for dangerous missions. The fact that it was probably suicide just made it more important to try. All hands prepare for combat approach. We're going to hit the smallest collective ship and try to board it. If we can capture one of their vessels intact, we might learn something useful for the main fleet. The Razor's Edge dropped out of stealth mode and accelerated toward the enemy formation. Cross had chosen her target carefully, a small escort vessel that was positioned away from the main group and seemed to be coordinating the shuttle traffic between the larger ships and the station. The collective ships didn't react immediately to the appearance of a single human scout ship. Their formation didn't change, and they continued their methodical harvesting operations. It was exactly the kind of arrogance Cross had hoped for. They're not even raising shields? Park reported. With amazement. I think they're trying to scan us instead of fighting. Their mistake, Cross replied as she armed the ship's weapons. Fire all kinetic batteries. Target their engine section. The Razor's Edge shuddered as her railguns discharged. Streams of depleted uranium penetrators crossed the distance between the ships at a significant fraction of light speed. The collective vessel's organic hull rippled and pulsed as the projectiles tore through sections that had never been designed to stop simple metal slugs. Direct hits, Captain. Their hull is breaching in multiple locations, and I'm reading massive internal damage. The enemy ship began to tumble as its engines failed. Emergency atmosphere vented from the wounds in glowing streams while the vessel's organic components seemed to writhe in pain. The other collective ships finally began to react, but their elegant formation worked against them in the confined space. Around the station. Cooper, get your Marines ready for boarding, Cross ordered. We've got maybe 2 minutes before their friends respond. The Marine sergeant was already sealing his armor. Copy that, Captain. Park, can you give us any intel on the ship's internal layout? Amy Park's fingers danced over her console as she analyzed the enemy vessel's energy patterns. The biological components seemed to form a network throughout the ship. I'm reading what might be a central processing node near the core. If you can reach it and plant a virus transmitter, we might be able to disrupt their communications. Cooper nodded and signaled his squad. 6 Marines in powered armor mag locked themselves to the hull of the disabled collective ship and began cutting through the outer plating. Their plasma torches made short work of the organic metal hybrid material inside the enemy vessel. They found a nightmare. The corridors were lined with pulsing organic conduits that carried not just power and data, but what looked like biological fluids. Worse yet, the ship was crewed by beings that had once been various alien species but were now grotesquely modified and connected to the ship's systems by thick cables that entered their skulls. Jesus Christ, one of the Marines whispered over these things used to be people. Cooper forced himself to focus on the mission even as his stomach churned. The enslaved crew members moved with mechanical precision, but their eyes still showed traces of the minds trapped inside. Some of them wore the tattered remains of Villani clothing. Keep moving, he ordered. We can't help them now, but maybe we can stop this from happening to anyone else. The team fought their way through corridors filled with modified slaves and organic machinery. Human weapons designed for simplicity and reliability proved devastatingly effective against enemies that had been programmed to counter energy weapons and exotic technologies. Chemical explosives destroyed the organic processing nodes while kinetic rounds punched through the hybrid armor of the enslaved crew. Park's voice crackled through their cums. Sergeant, I'm reading a massive energy surge from the central node. You need to get out of there now. Cooper looked around the pulsing chamber his team had reached. Hundreds of alien minds floated in organic pods, connected by thick cables to a central processing unit that throbbed with malevolent intelligence. The virus transmitter in his hand seemed pathetically small compared to the vast network surrounding them. "Negative, Park. This is what we came for," he replied as he activated the device. The virus transmitted by Park's equipment was specifically designed to attack biological computer networks. As it spread through the ship's organic systems, the enslaved minds began to convulse and scream. Some of them seemed to regain awareness for brief moments before the network tried to reassert control. "Cooper, get out of there!" Cross's voice was urgent. "The other collective ships are moving to intercept us, and that station is about to explode." The Marine sergeant placed the transmitter against the central processing node and watched as lines of code began flowing across its surface. The organic computer tried to adapt to the virus, but human programmers had designed the weapon to be deliberately chaotic and unpredictable. "Transmitter is active, Captain." "Whatever this thing learns, it's going to be gibberish," Cooper reported. As his team ran for the boarding point, they barely made it back to the Razor's Edge before the disabled collective ship exploded in a cascade of organic and mechanical failures. The virus had spread through the biological network and caused a complete system collapse. More importantly, the ship's quantum communicator had transmitted the corrupted data to every other vessel in the collective fleet before failing. "Captain, we need to go," Park called out. "The enemy ships are acting strange, but they're still moving." To intercept us, Cross looked at the tactical display and saw that the collective vessels were indeed behaving erratically. Their perfect formation had dissolved, and several ships seemed to be having problems with their navigation systems. The virus had worked better than they had hoped. "Set course for the rendezvous point," she ordered. "We need to get this intel back to the main fleet," as the Razor's Edge accelerated away from Proxima Refuge. Cooper made his report to Admiral Stone over the long-range communicator. The Marines had learned crucial information about collective ship design and crew composition, but the cost had been seeing what happened to the conquered species. "Sir, they're not just killing people," he said with barely controlled anger. "They're turning them into slaves and using them to crew their ships. Some of those things we fought used to be Villani civilians." Stone's voice crackled back over the comm, filled with grim determination. "Understood, Sergeant. Your intelligence will help us save the ones we can." Cross checked her sensors one more time as they reached the edge of the system. The main collective fleet was beginning to arrive, and their numbers were even larger than expected. Over 60 ships of various sizes were dropping out of hyperspace and moving toward human territory. But for the first time since the crisis began, she felt something other than dread. The enemy could be hurt, and their perfect coordination could be disrupted. The Deathworld species had drawn first blood and learned valuable lessons about their new enemy. The real battle was about to begin. *******. The Villani core system of Haven Prime had once been the jewel of their civilization. 7 inhabited worlds orbited a gentle yellow star, while massive orbital habitats housed billions of the peaceful aliens. Now the system looked like a graveyard. 3 worlds showed the telltale scorch marks of orbital bombardment, while the surviving planets cowered behind defensive shields that flickered with each enemy attack. Fleet. Admiral Rebecca Hunt stood on the bridge of her flagship Retribution and studied the tactical display with growing unease. The Harvest Collective had assembled the largest fleet in recorded galactic history. Over 200 ships of every conceivable design filled the space around Haven Prime like a metal plague. Worse yet, their formation showed a level of tactical sophistication that hadn't existed during the previous engagements. "Ma'am, enemy fleet composition analysis is complete," reported her tactical officer, Commander Lisa Park. The young woman's voice was steady, but Hunt could see the fear in her eyes. "We're looking at vessels from at least 20 different species, all unified under collective control. They've integrated human tactical data from our previous encounters." Colonel David Nash moved up from the Marine staging area where he had been briefing his Special Forces teams. The scarred veteran had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission, but his weathered face showed only Grim determination. Admiral, the intelligence from Captain Cross's boarding action was invaluable, but it also revealed something troubling, he said as he activated his personal datapad. Some of those enslaved crew members were human. The collective has been infiltrating our space and studying our tactics from captured. Personnel Hunt felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. The enemy wasn't just adapting to human weapons, they were learning human strategy from the source. Every advantage that had made the Deathworld species unique was being absorbed and turned against them. Dr. Chun, what's your assessment of their coordination capabilities? She asked. Dr. Lisa? Chun looked up from her psychological analysis console where she had been studying the enemy fleet movements. Her expertise in hive mind behavior had made her invaluable in understanding how the collective functioned. Admiral, their network shows signs of rapid adaptation and learning. Each engagement teaches them something new about human tactics. But I've also detected what might be a vulnerability. The hive mind that controls them appears to have a central processing node probably located on their flagship. You're suggesting we go after their command ship. More than that, Chun replied with growing excitement. If we could disrupt the central node, it might cause a cascade failure throughout their entire network. But it would require getting close enough to upload a virus directly into their core systems. Chancellor Vex of the Villani appeared on the main communication screen. The alien leader looked exhausted, and his normally pristine robes were stained with the blue blood of his people. Behind him, the lights of his command center flickered as another enemy barrage struck the planetary shields. Admiral Hunt, our defenses are failing, he reported in his musical voice. The collective ships are using modified human weapons now. Kinetic bombardment and plasma charges that our shields cannot deflect. We have perhaps 6 hours before the surface installations are destroyed. Hunt studied the tactical situation with the cold calculation that had made her one of humanity's most effective fleet commanders. The enemy had superior numbers, superior firepower, and intimate knowledge of human tactics. Any conventional assault would result in the complete destruction of her fleet. Colonel Nash, how quickly can you get a strike team aboard their command? Ship, she asked. Nash consulted his mission planning data. Given their defensive formations and the number of escort vessels, it would be a one-way trip, Admiral. Even if my team successfully infiltrated the flagship, we wouldn't have extraction options. Understood, Colonel. I'm not asking for a round trip. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Hunt was ordering a suicide mission against impossible odds with the fate of 2 civilizations hanging in the balance. Nash looked around at his officers and saw the same grim acceptance he had witnessed countless times before human soldiers. Choosing to die rather than surrender. Ma'am, my Special Forces team volunteers for the mission, he said formally. We'll need a distraction to get close to their flagship. You'll have it, Colonel, Hunt replied. Captain Martinez, are you monitoring this channel? The scarred face of Rosa Martinez appeared on a secondary screen. Her experimental dreadnought, indomitable, hung at the edge of the human formation, bristling with weapons that other species considered barbarically excessive. Copy, Admiral. My ship is ready for whatever you need. Hunt activated the fleet-wide communication system. Every human ship in the task force would hear her next words along with the thousands of crew members who had volunteered to follow her into hell. All ships, this is Admiral Hunt. We came here to help the Villani, but this has become something larger. The collective represents a threat to every free species in the galaxy. If we fail here, they will harvest world after world until nothing remains but slaves and stripped planets. She paused and looked at the faces of her bridge crew. These were good people who deserved better than dying in an impossible battle light years from home. But someone had to make the stand, and humanity had always specialized in fighting when surrender was the logical choice. We're going to hit them with everything we have. Full fleet assault on their main formation while Colonel Nash takes his team after their command ship. Some of us won't be going home, but we'll make these bastards remember what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species. The human fleet accelerated toward the collective formation in a pattern that looked suicidal to any observer. 43. Ships against more than 200, with the enemy holding every advantage except one. The humans had nothing left to lose, and that made them the most dangerous opponents the collective had ever faced. Captain Martinez led the first wave with her massive dreadnought spitting streams of kinetic penetrators and plasma charges. The Indomitable had been designed around the human philosophy of overwhelming firepower and redundant systems. When her main guns were destroyed by enemy fire, her secondary batteries continued firing. When those were disabled, her point defense systems turned outward and began engaging enemy fighters at close range. Nash's strike team used the chaos of the main battle to approach the collective flagship in a modified stealth transport. The enemy command ship was larger than anything in the human fleet, and its organic hull pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Boarding ports along its sides suggested that it was designed to assimilate captured vessels and crew. Colonel, the flagships defenses are focused on the main battle, reported his pilot. I can get you close, but you'll have to cut your own way inside. Nash looked at his team of 6 Special Forces operators. These were the best soldiers humanity had produced, veterans of countless boarding actions and impossible missions. They had volunteered knowing they would die to give their species a chance at survival. Remember the mission, he told them as they prepared their equipment. Get to the central processing node, upload the virus, and hold position as long as possible. Every second we buy gives the fleet a better chance. The transport ship slammed into the flagship's hull and immediately began cutting through the organic metal composite. Nash's team found themselves in corridors that were part machine and part living organism. Enslaved crew members from dozens of species moved through the passages with mechanical precision while organic processing nodes pulsed with stolen memories and knowledge. The worst part was seeing the human prisoners, men and women who had been captured during the collective's reconnaissance. Missions now walked the corridors with cables buried in their skulls and their eyes showing no recognition of their former humanity. Keep moving, Nash ordered as his team fought through waves of enslaved defenders. We can't save them, but we can stop this from happening to anyone else. They reached the central processing chamber to find something that defied description. Vast organic brain the size of a building floated in mechanical fluids while thousands of cables connected it to processing nodes throughout the ship. This was the Harvester Prime entity, the ancient intelligence that controlled the entire collective. Welcome, humans, a voice spoke directly into their minds without using sound. I have been studying your species with great interest. Your tactical innovations will make valuable additions to my network. Nash activated the virus transmitter even as organic tendrils erupted from the walls to capture his team. The device was designed to attack biological computer networks with chaotic data, patterns that couldn't be easily adapted to or controlled. Go to hell, he replied as the upload began. The entity's mental laughter was like ice in their minds. You misunderstand the situation? I allowed your infiltration because I wanted to capture human tactical specialists alive. Through your team, I will gain access to your fleet's command codes and strategic databases. Nash felt the organic cables beginning to burrow into his skull even as the virus continued its work. But he had one final surprise that the ancient intelligence hadn't expected. His team carried deadman switches that would detonate if their vital signs ceased. You made one mistake, he said as consciousness began to fade. You assumed we wanted to survive this mission. The explosion tore through the central chamber and sent cascades of disrupted data throughout the collective network. The virus had been uploaded successfully, but more importantly, Nash's final sacrifice had damaged the entity's core processing capabilities. Across the battle zone, collective ships began to falter as their coordination network failed. Some vessels turned on each other as confused and corrupted data flowed through their systems. Others simply drifted powerless as their enslaved crews experienced momentary freedom before the backup control systems engaged. Admiral Hunt watched the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet and knew that Nash's mission had succeeded. The collective could still fight, but they had lost their perfect coordination and tactical superiority. For the first time since the battle began, she allowed herself to hope that some of her people might survive. But the entity was far from finished, and its rage at being wounded by primitive Deathworlders would drive it to commit every resource to destroying the human fleet once and for all. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The Harvest Collective flagship writhed in space like a wounded beast. Organic fluids leaked from tears in its hull while emergency lights flickered through its transparent sections. Inside the central processing chamber, the Harvester Prime entity struggled to maintain control over its vast network as corrupted. Data cascaded through its systems. Private Kelly Rivers crouched in an access tunnel deep within the enemy ship and watched the chaos unfold around her. She was the sole survivor of Colonel Nash's strike team, and her orders were simple. Keep the Verus transmitter active for as long as possible while the entity tried to purge the infected data from its network. Admiral Hunt, this is Rivers, she whispered into her communicator. The virus is working, but the entity is adapting faster than expected. It's trying to isolate the infected sections and rebuild its network from backup nodes. Hunt's voice crackled back through the interference generated by the ship's organic systems. Understood, Private. How long can you maintain the transmission? Rivers checked her equipment and felt her heart sink. The virus transmitter was overheating from the constant data flow, and her power cells were nearly exhausted. More importantly, she could hear the sound of approaching footsteps as enslaved crew members searched the ship for her location. Maybe 10 more minutes, Admiral? After that, the entity will regain full control of its fleet. In the space around Haven Prime, the battle had reached a critical point. The human fleet had been reduced to less than 20 ships, while the Collective still had over 100 functional vessels. Captain Martinez's dreadnought Indomitable drifted powerless with her reactor core breached, but her crew continued to fire manually operated weapons at any enemy ship that came within range. Admiral Hunt made the hardest decision of her career. Her remaining ships couldn't win a conventional battle, but they might still accomplish something that would matter. She opened the channel to every surviving human vessel in the task force. All ships, this is Hunt. We're going to execute Protocol 7. Ram the largest enemy vessels and detonate our reactor cores. Make every shot count and take as many of them with you as possible. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every ship captain confirmed their understanding without hesitation or argument. The Deathworld species had always known that some battles could only be won by those willing to die for victory. The remaining human ships accelerated toward the Collective formation at maximum velocity. Their crews had disabled safety systems and overloaded their reactors to create the largest possible explosions. Some vessels were intercepted by enemy fire, but others reached their targets and detonated in brilliant flashes that lit up the entire system. Captain Martinez watched the tactical display from her crippled ship as her fellow captains made their final sacrifice. The Indomitable was too damaged to maneuver, but she still had one last card to play. Her experimental reactor could be configured for a cascade detonation that would release more energy than a small star. This is Martinez to all surviving ships. I'm going to ram the flagship and try to take out their command center. If Private Rivers is still alive in there, I'm sorry, but this is the only way. Rivers heard the transmission and understood what it meant. In 5 minutes, the most powerful warship in the human fleet was going to collide with her position and detonate. With enough force to crack a moon, she looked at her virus transmitter and made a decision that would have impressed her. Commanding officers, instead of trying to escape, she began modifying the device to create a feedback loop in the entity's network. If she could maintain the connection when the Indomitable exploded, the massive energy surge would be transmitted directly into the Collective's organic computers. Computer, this is Rivers. Tell Admiral Hunt that I'm going to try something. If it works, the feedback should cascade through their entire network when your ship hits. The Harvester Prime entity suddenly spoke directly into her mind with a voice like grinding metal. Foolish human, your species fights with primitive weapons and crude tactics. You cannot defeat intelligence that spans galaxies and has absorbed the knowledge of 20 civilizations. Rivers continued working on her modifications. Even as organic tendrils began breaking through the access tunnel walls. Maybe not, but we're too stupid to know when we're beaten. That's got to count for something. The entity's mental laughter was cold and alien. Your sacrifice is meaningless. Even if you destroy this vessel, I have backup nodes throughout the galaxy. The collective will continue its harvest until every world is stripped bare. Yeah, well, Rivers replied as she connected the final circuit. That's a problem for someone else to solve. Right now I just need to make sure you remember what happens. When you mess with humans, the Indomitable struck the flagship at a significant fraction of light speed just as Rivers activated her modified transmitter. The Dreadnought's experimental reactor detonated in a cascade explosion that sent energy surging through both ship systems. The feedback loop Rivers had created channeled that massive power directly into the entity's organic network. The effect was beyond anything the human military planners had imagined. The energy surge didn't just disrupt the collective's communications, it awakened every enslaved consciousness in their network. Across the battle zone, alien crew members suddenly remembered who they had been before their capture and turned on their organic implants. Ambassador Lyra watched from the bridge of a Villani rescue ship as collective vessels began attacking each other. Enslaved minds that had been suppressed for years were fighting back against their controllers. Some ships simply shut down as their crews destroyed the organic processing nodes, while others erupted in internal battles between freed prisoners and loyal collective drones. By the ancient lights, she whispered in amazement. The humans have freed them all. The remaining human ships pressed their attack against the confused and fractured enemy fleet. Without their perfect coordination and hive mind control, the collective ships were vulnerable to the kind of chaotic, unpredictable tactics that humans specialized in. Vex's voice crackled over the communication system from the surface of Haven Prime. Admiral Hunt, our sensors show massive energy discharges throughout the enemy fleet. Their formation is collapsing and many ships appear to be fighting each other, but Hunt barely heard him. She was staring at the expanding cloud of debris where the Indomitable and the collective flagship had been. Captain Martinez and Private Rivers had given their lives to strike a blow that might save both their civilizations, but the cost had been enormous. All ships continue the attack, she ordered with a voice heavy with grief. Don't let their sacrifice be wasted. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Freed slaves fought against their former captors, while human ships provided support with their remaining weapons. Species that had been enslaved for decades suddenly found themselves fighting for their freedom. Alongside the Deathworld warriors who had made it possible, Dr. Chun monitored the communications networks and provided real-time analysis of the situation. Admiral, the entity's primary consciousness appears to have been destroyed, but individual ship nodes are still trying to maintain control. The freed prisoners are having varying degrees of success in overcoming their implants. Some liberation attempts succeeded completely, with alien crew members destroying their organic controllers and regaining full autonomy. Others resulted in partial freedom, where the enslaved minds could resist but not entirely overcome their programming. A few ships remained under full collective control, but they were isolated and outnumbered. The tide of battle turned decisively when a group formerly enslaved Rigelian engineers managed to take control of a heavy cruiser and turn its weapons against their former masters. Their success inspired similar uprisings throughout the enemy fleet as species after species chose freedom over the false security of the hive mind. Ambassador Lyra's ship picked up Admiral Hunt's battered flagship and provided medical assistance to the survivors. As the last collective vessels either surrendered or self-destructed, Lyra found herself standing beside the human commander, watching the aftermath of the greatest space battle in galactic history. "Your people saved us all," she said in her musical voice. The collective controlled 17 species and was preparing to harvest dozens more. But the Deathworld warriors showed the galaxy that even the darkest tyranny can be defeated by those willing to sacrifice everything for freedom. Hunt looked at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of both fleets. Less than a dozen human ships had survived the battle, and thousands of good people had died to win this victory. But across the system, freed slaves were helping each other repair their ships and plan for a future without the collective's control. They'll build something better, she said quietly. All those species working together instead of being controlled by some ancient intelligence. Maybe that's worth what it cost. The memorial service was held in space between the human and Villani fleets. Representatives from 7 different species that had been freed from collective control attended to honor the humans who had died for their liberation. Ambassador Lyra spoke for all of them when she addressed the survivors. Today we learn that freedom is never free, and that sometimes the greatest gift one species can give another is the willingness to fight impossible battles. The humans prove that courage and sacrifice can overcome any tyranny no matter how powerful or ancient. Admiral Hunt looked out at the stars and thought about the future. The galaxy would rebuild, and the freed species would create new alliances based on mutual respect rather than domination. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be other threats to face, but at least they would face them as free peoples, the Deathworld. Species had kept their promise to help those who could not help themselves, and in doing so had changed the course of galactic history forever.